So I'm delighted to be here with Kevin Newell of Prevos Solutions, who is going to chat to us today about little tips, especially for small businesses in terms of getting the best out of your IT, which is a huge issue for businesses right across the board. We'll be talking about the value or the benefits or advantages of outsourcing IT versus the disadvantages. And we'll be talking about how you can maximize productivity and profitability by simply looking at your IT, and how you can take maybe, Kevin, a load off your own back, because to a lot of people, IT being technical and difficult, it's a piece of their business they often neglect and maybe hope it goes away. But before we go into the nitty gritty of it, and Kevin, you're going to give one clear tip sometime along this video as well. One very good tip today to business owners on how to deal with their IT. But before we really get into the nitty gritty of it, Kevin, I'd like to hear a little bit about your own background, how you came to set up the business here in Galway, and where you came from on it.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Breandán. So I suppose it started back in 2011. Myself and my business partner, we started Prevos Solutions back then. Now, that's the year I came back to Galway after 14 years in the US, where I worked. I had a senior role there with a major financial research firm. But when I was there, I always wanted to return home to start a business leveraging my background in technology and customer service. Now, I suppose when I came home, we identified an opening in the market for a high quality IT services provider focused on customer service. And I suppose like any business, like you just start from scratch. So I just contacted my friends and people I knew, and I said, listen, if you have any IT requirements, just let us know. So we started with one customer. We were very excited about that. And I suppose it just grew on top of that. And we mostly grew on referrals actually from satisfied customers. And I suppose from the outset, we wanted to do it right. We wanted to build a scalable business. So we started using the concept of, based on systems, we used we built a set of very clear policies and procedures on using best practices way for everything for the business, for how we undertook an IT survey, for how we dealt with customer support, how we dealt with service desk issues, leveraging best practices along the way. Now, that actually helped our growth in terms of like getting more customers, managing the growth, and actually even taking on additional staff up to that point.
Kevin, one issue that you term as the handyman, if you like, the handyman syndrome, it seems to affect a lot of small businesses in terms of IT, and hinders their growth. And I think people are guilty of it sometimes without knowing or thinking too much about it. And maybe our listeners can think about it in terms of, would that be them? But can you explain to us, what is the handyman syndrome?
Yeah, it was funny. It came up quite frequently. Like, I mean, I never thought I'd be in cold calling or anything like that, but it's something you have to do as a business person. And I might get on the phone with a business owner, and I'd explain our value offering, and he would say something. It would kind of go along the lines like, thanks for calling, Kevin. It sounds great, but you know what? I have someone here, and he's brilliant. He's a nephew of mine, or he's one of my engineers, and he's handy enough with IT, and he kind of takes care of everything. So it kind of it goes something like along those lines. So the prototypical example would say John. He owns an accountancy practice, and he's never had an IT provider because he has this like whiz of a son or a nephew or an employee or a family friend who fixes all his IT issues, and he's very, very happy with that. So he doesn't need to see any reason that he needs to change anything. Now, it's just say, for example, I would have spoken to John in say year one. Frequently, I cross paths with John in year 2 or year 3, where I maybe follow up with him, or he calls me and he said, listen, I would like to talk to you about a few things, because I think we need to make some changes. Now, what happens is that when you really drill down into the issues of this handyman who's very good at doing things, and you might be saving a lot of money because he's a nephew and he doesn't really charge you, or he's already an employee, so you're paying him anyway, the business owner ends up paying in the long run, because like if the handyman is a relative or a family friend, oftentimes there's no agreed plan in place. There's no agreed service level. So when something critical happens, that's when things fall apart, and it exposes the business to needless risk. And more critically, the handyman's understanding of what he does is frequently at odds at what the business owner's understanding is, because it's a lot of times it's very informal, and the breakdown of the understanding, or actually it's in sharp relief, that only becomes clear when things badly go wrong, because that's when, oh, I thought you were covering that, and your man said, well, you only told me you needed me like as needed, basically. Now, sometimes the handyman is an employee of the business, and he might, oftentimes, he's not necessarily an IT expert, but he happens to know the most about IT in the business. And not taken away from this person, but frequently the level of IT just isn't up to the mark. And he wouldn't have the knowledge of the latest technologies, or basically how to implement them. And it also puts an unfair demand on that employee, because he's doing a job that he wasn't being paid to do. It might be causing him extra stress, and it might be actually a very inefficient way for the business owner to spend his money, where if he employed this guy to do job X, he's then doing something which he's not really qualified to do. So in the long run, is the business owner saving money? He's probably spending more money in the long run compared to the cost of hiring an IT services provider. It's frequently not as expensive as people think it is, and most of the time you're saving a massive amount of money.
Actually, let's talk about that, because that is a fear that a lot of people would have, Kevin, and I suppose it may be the reason why the handyman situation is allowed to continue, and that somebody, quite often from what I would experience, it may be somebody who's working in the business already and whose time then is robbed, as you said, unproductively, by trying to put out fires, maybe with regard to IT. But a lot of the reason will be for the smaller business. And I'm thinking about the professions, especially the accountants, small accountancy firms, the solicitors, the businesses with maybe 10 or 15 people in there. A lot of the reason that they don't outsource is that they would think, listen, it's a huge cost, and it's not a cost we can carry. And to be honest with you, we seem to trundle along fine. Okay, we have some problems every once in a while, but Joe can fix them for us, So tell us about that. I mean, is that perception wrong?
Yeah, it's funny. It's I suppose, like, at first glance, like, engage with an IT. So basically our business model mostly is, we would engage with a company in terms of a managed service agreement, and it all starts from there. And with that managed service agreement, it includes like unlimited remote support, rapid response to critical issues. But I suppose what the big thing for most business owners, it's yet another monthly bill that they have to that they have to contend with. And of course, I mean, there's no shortage of bills for business owners these days. But just that aside, like, the benefits, when they're laid out, they're very clear, actually. So the benefits would be, as I spoke already, a rapid response. So we have agreed service levels with all our clients, and that actually contractually obliges us to respond very quickly if things go wrong, and within a day for most of other IT issues. Another thing that's included in our service is backup of your critical data. The first thing we do is when we engage with a customer, we look at all the data. We say, okay, what's critical? What would actually take down your business if you lost it? So we focus on that, and all the other business that's important to the running or the organization. And we make sure that that's backed up every day. And it's something that we take responsibility for. So that's one less headache for the business owner. And that's a very important part of what we do. Another aspect of what we do for the monthly service agreement is there's a thorough IT audit. We look at everything in the business. We look at all your switches, computers, servers, even the way the network is set up, your license keys, your subscriptions. And so when we get all that, no, we do have to, in a way, like push the client to get all this to us, because it's a little bit of a pain to go through your records and get all these things to us. But once we have them, and we're not going to ask you for them again. And what that enables us to do is, when any aspect of your IT goes astray or goes awry or needs attention, and it resolves at a critical IT incident, which might result in several users, if not the whole business, being down for a certain amount of time, we have all the information we need to proceed very rapidly to fix it. Another aspect of what we do is the unlimited IT support, remote support, which a lot of businesses don't realize, because any issue that we can resolve remotely over the phone or over the computer, that's covered in that monthly fee. And it's and we can do quite a lot with that. And a lot of times we can engage with third-party providers on your behalf. If their systems is causing an interruption to you, we'll just say, listen, we'll already have the guy's number or the website or the email, because that's done in the IT audit. So we'll call him. You don't need to worry about it, and you sit back, and we basically just manage the whole thing. And that's probably one of the biggest benefits that our customers find from engaging with us, is they're not being billed for every single time they file an issue with us. And that's kind of, they're the main benefits really from engaging with us on a long-term basis.
And essentially, for what is it, Kevin, a couple of €100 or something like that, you have all
On
of
average.
that service.
Yeah, on average, yeah. I mean, it depends on the size of the business, but for most small businesses, it comes in at less than 200 quid a month.
Which will shock a lot of business owners, because the thought would be, listen, if I'm going to outsource my IT, it's going to cost me, the wage of somebody else who should be here. But actually, it frees up somebody internally to do their work genuinely and provides a better IT service, is what you're essentially saying, for really a fraction of a cost for something so essential.
Exactly, yeah, and it's economies of scale as well. Like we have several customers that use this, and we have very efficient engineers. We have a very good service desk, so we have everything lined up that we can actually support customers for that price range as well. I mean, there's other costs that might be on top of that, but they're pretty rare. Like if we have to go on site. Now, what we found in 2020, we were already providing mostly remote support to customers anyway. But I suppose with the pandemic, we switched to we rarely go on site to customers now. So what we're finding now is that we can do much remote support, fully remote support, than we were able to do before, because we physically there's so many more barriers to go on site to customers now these days with the restrictions.
Yeah. Kevin, before I leave you, you were going to give us one clear tip that'll help people with the way they look at IT, I suppose, and help their business in that way. So what is that tip?
I suppose that it's a lot of people overlook this. It's something called multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. And so now passwords, it's a big bugbear with a lot of our clients. It's like, and of course you're supposed to have a unique password for every instance that you do. A lot of customers don't, because it's hard to manage actually, but
Hard to remember.
Yeah, and even having a complex password like capital letters and lowercase and numbers and a special character. But even if you have a very good password like that, it's impossible to guess, or it's not your child's name, or the place where you grew up or something like that. Which hackers actually, it's funny, sometimes they actually do that research and they try those combinations. But
Sure.
what they do now is just say and sometimes hackers actually target particular individuals, particular businesses. They will find your email, which is public information most of the time anyway,
Hmm.
and they'll look at something which you were probably using. And with our social media profiles, we frequently make a lot of our data more public than we realize. So
Sure.
they might guess that they're using product X associated with this email address, and they'll actually put that through an algorithm to their software to basically break that password. So
Okay.
it could be as long as or complex what you want. If someone wants to guess your password, um, these bad actors, they will.
Hmm.
So just say they do have your password, they basically have access to your entire system. They have your customer details, massive GDPR implications, and there's some of those fines are just astronomical.
Yeah.
Now, what multi-factor authentication is it's a second layer of protection. So if they crack your password, multi-factor authentication kicks in, and it's either your mobile phone or it's another software application that you as a user get a warning, say, listen, you are trying to access this from this location, and you're prompted for a code that's actually texted to your phone.
Yeah.
Um, these bad actors, of course, won't have access to your phone because they're in other countries, and they can't get access to your systems without that code, which only you have access to. So that is another level of protection. It's frequently free in most software products these days. Sometimes it's a little bit tricky to find, but it's usually like a zero cost measure for immeasurable benefits, basically just protecting yourself from exposure.
So a serious tip there for business owners, because really our data is priceless in terms of securing our business. So multi-factor authentication is your tip for today, and I think people will be well to heed it. Kevin, it's been great talking to you. Thanks very much. I think there's a lot there for people to consider, especially maybe people who wouldn't have thought of outsourcing IT and having that particular headache, if you like, totally managed professionally for them, and maybe saving money and freeing up somebody else in terms of the productivity and what they can do. So I think there's a lot of food for thought in that. So thanks very much for your time today, Kevin.
You're very welcome, Brendan. Thank you.